The clause on the page would have ruined him by Friday. I saw it in 3 seconds, because I'd watched the same trick destroy me. If you like stories where one line of fine print flips an entire life upside down, subscribe now. Because what I'm about to tell you is the night I stopped being invisible and started a war in a suit jacket. For 4 years, I'd survived by becoming nothing. Not weak, nothing. A shadow that didn't ask questions. A woman who didn't look twice. A pair of hands that cooked, cleaned, plated, and disappeared before the boss ever had to acknowledge I existed. They called me Sarah, short for Serena, the name on my fake ID and the payroll sheet in the kitchen office. My real name, Serafina Rinaldi, had been dragged across Boston like broken glass. I used to argue M&A clauses in conference rooms with walls of skyline. I used to make senior partners shut up with one sentence and a highlighted paragraph. I used to be the girl they sent in when a client wanted to play cute and bury poison inside standard language. Then my fiancé made me the poison. Dominic Ferraro had been charming, brilliant, ambitious. Everything you wanted in a colleague and everything you shouldn't have trusted with your life. When I confronted him about missing funds in a client trust account, he cried and swore he'd fix it. He kissed my forehead. He called me his conscience. And that night, while I slept, he logged into my workstation and planted a trail that made me look like the thief. By the time I realized what he'd done, the narrative was already written. Promising young attorney, seduced by greed, betrays clients, disgraces the firm. My license was suspended before my coffee got cold. My name became a cautionary tale. So I vanished. A man named Alexei Koval hired a cook. Everyone in Boston knew the Koval name, even if they pretended not to. Legitimate businessman, the newspaper said. Shipping, real estate, private equity, charitable foundations. A few sharp acquisitions that made old money families nervous. In back rooms and closed-door clubs, people said different words. They said predator. They said kingmaker. They said you didn't cross him unless you enjoyed funerals. I didn't care what they called him. I cared that his house needed a cook who didn't talk, didn't pry, and didn't come with a resume that could be Googled. 4 years, I managed it. I arrived before dawn. I left after the silver was polished. I made everything taste perfect because perfection was the only part of my old life I could still control. And I avoided him. Not because I was frightened of violence, because I was frightened of being seen. That night, the lamb was seared and resting, the rosemary still bright, the pan sauce glossy the way it should be. I arranged everything the way I used to arrange evidence. Clean, precise, undeniable. Marco, one of Alexei's security men, stuck his head in the kitchen doorway. Dining room's cleared, he said. Table's ready. My stomach tightened. I hated entering his space. Even if he barely looked at me, it was still the one moment each day where the orbit of his world brushed mine. I carried the tray out with steady hands and the calm face of a woman who had trained herself not to flinch. The dining room was all dark wood and quiet power, leather chairs that looked like they'd never heard the word comfort. A chandelier that could have bought a modest home. Alexei sat at the head of the table, alone, sleeves rolled to the forearm, white dress shirt open at the throat like he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't looking at the food. He was looking at paper. A contract, heavy stock, signature tabs. I set the plate down and kept my eyes trained where they belonged. On the table's edge, on the placement of the fork, on the safe neutrality of routine. Thank you, he murmured, voice low with a faint Russian cadence that never fully faded. I should have turned away. I would have turned away. But the page was angled just enough, the formatting just familiar enough, that my brain, my old brain, the one that used to win, woke up like it had been slapped. Clause numbers, schedule references, that particular spacing in the definition section that screamed big firm drafting. And one phrase, one tiny boilerplate phrase, hooked into my ribs like a blade, subject to existing encumbrances and prior obligations. My hands went cold. I left the room, I returned to the kitchen, and I scrubbed the roasting pan like it was a confession I could erase if I worked hard enough. Maria, the head housekeeper, watched me from her stool with the soft patience of someone who'd seen too much hurt and learned to speak gently anyway. You're going to scrub a hole through that, she said. Long day. They're all long days, she replied, sipping her coffee. Then quieter. You ever think about leaving? Working somewhere normal? Cooking for people who don't carry guns in their suits? I forced a shrug. I like it here. It's quiet. Maria's eyes sharpened. No, Carita. It's not quiet. You're quiet. I didn't answer because the truth tasted like shame. I was hiding. I had built my entire life out of silence. Marco appeared again, and this time his expression wasn't casual. Boss wants to see you. My heart did something stupid. Stuttered, then slammed. In 4 years, Alexei Koval had never summoned me. Me? My voice came out thin. Yeah, you. Now. I dried my hands on my apron and walked back to the dining room like I was headed to my own sentencing. Alexei had pushed his plate aside. The contract was now surrounded by other documents like an autopsy in progress. "You're the cook," he said, not asking. "Yes, sir." "How long?" "4 years." He lifted his gaze, and for the first time, I got the full weight of him. Ice gray eyes, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, a face that didn't waste expressions on people who didn't matter. He made people matter by deciding they did. "And in those 4 years," he said, "have you noticed anything unusual about my paperwork?" A chill moved up my spine. "I don't read your documents," I lied. "I bring meals." A humorless curve touched his mouth. "Tonight, you read." My throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." "I'm not offended," he cut in. "I'm curious." He stood and moved around the table with the calm grace of an animal that didn't fear any room it entered. "Do you read English?" "Yes." "Do you understand legal language?" The air went heavy. This was the moment where survival asked me to lie again, to retreat, to bury myself deeper. But the contract phrase kept flashing in my mind like a warning light. And something else, something sharp and old, rose up in me. "I used to," I said carefully. "Before." "Before what?" "Before Dominic Ferraro destroyed my career. Before I learned the legal system could be bought like a steak. Before my name became something people whispered when they wanted to scare young associates into obedience." My voice came out flat. "Before I was disbarred." Alexei's gaze sharpened. "For what?" "Embezzlement." The word tasted like poison. "I didn't do it." He studied me for a long moment, then said softly, "Your name isn't Sarah." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Serafina Rinaldi." He repeated it like he was testing the weight. "I remember the case. Assistant DA said you stole nearly $500,000. All lies," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. "Very convincing lies." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit." I sat because his tone didn't allow the illusion of refusal. He slid the contract toward me. "This," he said. "Tell me what you saw." My fingers hovered above the page. My hands shook, not from fear of him, but from the sensation of becoming myself again, like stepping into a room you haven't entered in years and realizing your body still remembers where everything is. I found the clause. "Here," I said, tapping the paragraph. "Clause 17, subsection B. The language reads standard, except it isn't, not with your appendix structure." Alexei leaned in. Victor and Dmitri, 2 of his closest men, were already in the doorway, drawn by whatever shift had changed in the air. "They're referencing Schedule A," I continued, voice steadier now. "But they don't deliver Schedule A with the contract. They deliver it at closing." Dmitri frowned. So? "So it means you sign blind?" I said. "You accept existing obligations without knowing what those obligations are. Then they hand you Schedule A at closing and it's full of poison. Debt you didn't expect, contracts you didn't consent to, penalties that trigger the moment you take control." Victor's eyes narrowed. "And we can't back out?" I flipped 2 pages. "This clause," I said, tapping. "Discrepancies between verbal assurances and written terms resolve in favor of the written document. So any promises made to you verbally, no significant liabilities, clean contracts, become worthless. You'll be legally bound to whatever they reveal after you've already committed." Silence held the room. Alexei didn't blink. "How long did it take you to spot this?" 3 seconds, I admitted. "Because it's the same structure Dominic Ferraro used. He hid toxic schedules until signatures were locked." Alexei's expression tightened. "Ferraro." My stomach dropped. Victor spoke first. "Ferraro's at Marchetti and Locke now." Dmitri added, "They're representing the sellers." Alexei turned his head slightly, eyes like winter glass. "My signing is Thursday." "It's a trap," I said. "A legal one, but still a trap." Alexei picked up his phone. "Cancel Thursday," he said into it. "Now, get me Victor's full team and my financial analysts in my office." He ended the call and looked at me. "You're coming with me." "Sir, that wasn't a request," he said, and then quieter, more dangerous. "Serafina." Hearing my real name in his mouth sent a shiver through my blood. I followed him into a room I'd never entered in 4 years. His office, walls of books, strategy, finance, law, warfare, the kind of library built by a man who understood that power lived in information. He pointed to a desk. "You're going to draft amendments," he said. "You're going to tell me how to make them choke on their own clause." "I can't practice," I said too fast. "I'm disbarred." Alexei smiled without warmth. "You're not practicing," he said. "You're advising me. And if Ferraro discovers I'm here," Alexei's voice turned soft, "then Ferraro will learn what it means to target someone I decide is mine to protect." The word protect should have comforted me. Instead, it made my skin prickle. Because protection from a man like Alexei Koval wasn't free. It was a chain disguised as a shield. But when I looked back at the contract, at the familiar shape of Dominic's fraud disguised as professionalism, I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Purpose. I swallowed. How long do we have? 48 hours, Alexei said. Can you do it? I steadied my hands. Yes. Alexei nodded once. Good, he said. Then you're done hiding in my kitchen. And in that moment, I realized my quiet life had ended. Because the second I touched that contract, I didn't just step back into law. I stepped into Alexei Koval's war. By dawn, the amendments were surgical, not loud, not dramatic. Just precise enough that any competent attorney would read them and feel the cold sweat of being seen. Schedule A delivered within 24 hours, not at closing. A 30-day review window. A materiality threshold with a hard walkaway clause. Verbal assurances incorporated as binding representations. A personal certification by the seller's counsel that no material obligations were omitted. Tripwires. Not obvious ones. Elegant ones. Victor's team turned my small side office into a miniature war room. Encrypted laptop, secure printer, database access, and a locked cabinet full of documents that could ruin people. Coffee appeared when my hands started shaking. When I forgot to eat, food appeared anyway. And at 2 a.m, Alexei appeared in the doorway holding 2 espresso cups like he'd been doing it my whole life. You refused dinner, he said. I didn't notice. I know, he replied, setting the cup down. Then he sat across from me like a man who didn't need permission to occupy space. Walk me through it, he said. So I did. I talked him through the deal the way I used to talk a client through a hostile purchase. Calm, controlled, making it sound inevitable. Alexei listened the way dangerous men listen. Not for beauty, not for reassurance, but for leverage. His questions were sharp. When I explained why the materiality threshold was 10 million, he didn't argue. He asked what number would make them flinch. 10 feels reasonable, I said. But it's low enough to catch the debt they're hiding. If they fight that number, it confirms the poison is worse. Alexei's gaze held mine. You're angry. I'm not, I lied. He sipped his espresso. 4 years ago, you were in love. Love makes people stupid. His eyes didn't move. Now you're not stupid. The accuracy hit like a punch. I forced my attention back to the screen. Victor delivers the amendments at 9. He'll deliver them personally, Alexei said, and he'll make sure Ferraro knows you exist again. My pulse tripped. No. If Dominic recognizes my drafting style, good, Alexei said softly. Let him. I stared at him. You want him to know I'm alive? I want him to understand he failed, Alexei replied. And I want him to panic. I should have hated the thrill that moved through me, but I didn't. At 9:14 a.m., Victor called from Marchetti and Locke's lobby. A junior associate accepted the envelope, he said. She has no idea what she's carrying. How long until they respond? I asked, watching the elevator camera feed like it was a courtroom door. Alexei's voice was calm. Minutes. He was right. At 9:21, Victor's phone rang again. He listened, then covered the receiver. Senior partner wants an immediate meeting, he said. Says there's been a misunderstanding. I felt my mouth curve. Not misunderstanding, discovery. Alexei's eyes flickered with approval. Tell them 3 p.m. They pushed for earlier. Too late, the partner said through Victor's speaker. This afternoon might be too late. Too late. That phrase snagged my mind. It's a deadline, I murmured. Alexei looked at me. Explain. Fraud this layered requires coordination, I said. Payments, shell entities, timelines. Someone needs the signing done by a certain date because a second move is already scheduled. Someone waiting to buy the company back from you after the liabilities surface. Victor's jaw tightened. A buyer expecting control by a certain date. Exactly, I said. Delaying doesn't just protect you. It disrupts their whole plan. Alexei's gaze turned hard. Then we disrupt. At 3 p.m., we met them at the Harborview Hotel's executive conference room. Neutral territory, but Alexei's security swept it first. It didn't matter where the meeting happened. Everyone in the room would still understand who held the power. Richard Chan, the senior partner, arrived first. He had the polished calm of a man who survived on plausible deniability. Margaret Keane followed. Corporate specialist, sharp eyes, hands that never stopped moving. And then Dominic Ferraro walked in. He wore success-like armor, tailored suit, expensive watch, confidence curated down to the angle of his smile. Then he saw me. The color drained from his face. For half a second, his body forgot how to lie. Fear showed. He recovered quickly. Dominic always recovered quickly, but it was too late. I'd seen the crack. Ms. Rinaldi, Richard said smoothly, like my name wasn't a ghost returned to haunt them. Unexpected. Private consulting, I replied, and held Dominic's gaze just long enough to feel him flinch. We sat. Alexei at the head, me to his right, Victor to his left. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. Dominic's eyes kept flicking to my hand, to see if I wore a ring, to see if I belonged. Richard began with practiced indignation. Your amendments are extensive. Our clients feel they demonstrate a lack of good faith. They demonstrate a refusal to be defrauded, I said. Dominic leaned forward, voice sharpened with contempt to mask fear. These provisions are standard. If you were familiar with current corporate practice, I'm intimately familiar with the practice of hiding poison schedules until signatures are locked. I cut in. Some might call it a signature move. The implication landed. Margaret's fingers paused. Richard's smile thinned. Dominic's jaw tightened so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Alexei didn't speak yet. He simply watched, and his silence was a threat more effective than shouting. Richard attempted a compromise. We can provide a preliminary schedule within 7 days. No, Alexei said quietly, and the room went colder. Full disclosure before signing or no deal. Mr. Koval, that's not reasonable. What's not reasonable, I said, is asking my client to commit millions without knowing what he's purchasing. Unless there's something you'd prefer he not see until it's too late. Richard asked for 10 minutes to confer privately. Alexei granted 10. When they left, Victor leaned toward me. They're panicking. They should, I said. Alexei's hand touched my shoulder. Brief, supportive, and unbearably intimate in a room full of sharks. Whatever they try, he murmured, we're ready. They returned with another offer. Schedule in 48 hours, full version later. Walk-away clause if liabilities exceeded a threshold. A trap wrapped in the language of compromise. No, I said before Alexei could. Dominic's temper finally broke. You're being unreasonable. This isn't how deals work. This is exactly how deals work when one side suspects fraud, I replied. And given your history, Mr. Ferraro, I'd think you'd want to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. The room went still. Margaret's eyes darted to Dominic. Richard's voice sharpened. That's a serious accusation. It's an observation, I said. I worked with Mr. Ferraro. I'm simply noting he has experience crafting structures designed to hide material information. Dominic stood abruptly, face flushing. I won't sit here and be slandered. Then leave, Alexei said softly. Dominic froze. Alexei continued, voice even. If you walk out, the deal dies. And I will make sure every buyer in this city hears that your firm couldn't provide basic transparency. Richard raised a hand quickly. Let's not escalate. But the damage was done. Dominic was no longer the confident attorney. He was a man seeing his past crawl out of the ground. We forced full schedule delivery by 9 a.m. the next day. And when Victor's investigators traced one of Richard's calls to a Cayman shell, Dimitri brought the name that made the air vanish from my lungs. The shell leads back to the Varga Syndicate, he said. Alexei's rivals, a family that didn't negotiate. They erased. This isn't a bad deal, Alexei said quietly. It's an attack. I felt sick. Then we walk away. Alexei's eyes turned to me. No, Alexei, they used your nightmare to target me, he said. They involved someone under my protection. Under my protection. The phrase tightened around my ribs. We don't walk away, Alexei continued. We turn it. How? He smiled, cold and controlled. We sign. I stared. The traps will destroy whoever owns the company when they spring. Yes, Alexei said, which is why it won't be me. Understanding struck like a match. You want them to trigger their own poison, I whispered. Alexei's gaze held mine. Design it. It should have terrified me. Instead, something fierce lit inside my chest. Because for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't begging a system to save me. I was building the mechanism that would save us, and destroy the men who thought they could write my ending in fine print. That night, Victor arranged a private, preliminary meeting with Dominic. No lawyers, no witnesses, soundproof room. Just 4 people. Alexei, Victor, Dominic, and me. Dominic arrived wary, but he still wore his arrogance like it could protect him. Alexei slid a folder across the table. Read, he said. Bank records, email metadata, security footage. Dominic at my computer at 2 a.m., the night my life collapsed. Dominic's hands started shaking before he reached the last page. Where did you get this? He whispered. It doesn't matter, I said. You did it. Dominic looked up at me, and for the first time I saw real fear. Pure, undiluted. Alexei spoke like a judge pronouncing sentence. You have 2 options. He laid them out with calm cruelty. Confess publicly, cooperate, clear my name completely, accept prison, or disappear. Leave Boston tonight. Leave law forever. Become no one. Dominic tried to call it extortion. I leaned forward, voice quiet. What you did to me was extortion. This is accountability. Dominic's shoulders slumped. Alexei's tone sharpened. And you will tell us everything about the Varga plan. Dominic spoke for 2 hours. 3 more traps buried in subsidiary agreements. Equipment leases with penalties that could choke a company in weeks. A union contract with automatic pay escalators triggered by ownership change. A sealed environmental lawsuit that could exceed $100 million. My stomach turned. Even with my scrutiny, we'd missed poison. We walk away, I said again, colder now. Alexei's smile returned. No. I stared at him. Alexei, the traps will destroy whoever is holding the assets when they trigger, he said. So we move the assets. He looked at Dominic. You'll draft a structure, we close the acquisition, then transfer operational control immediately into a holding entity they can't trace in time. When their traps spring, the liabilities crash into their own web, not mine. Dominic blinked, then slowly nodded. You want to flip the trap, he said, voice hollow. Alexei's gaze didn't waver. You have until 9 a.m. Dominic left with Victor under escort to draft, and when the door shut, the room felt too quiet. I looked at Alexei. We just made a thief face consequences, he said, and crossed lines. I murmured. Alexei moved closer, his presence filling the space like gravity. Lines are for men who can afford to lose, he said. You couldn't afford to lose 4 years ago. His hand lifted and his knuckles brushed my cheek, so gentle it made my chest ache. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Every rational part of me screamed, but the parts of me that had been starved, respect, purpose, safety, reached for him like a drowning woman reaching for air. I didn't tell him to stop. I kissed him. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't careful. It was years of silence breaking open. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. This complicates things, he said. Yes, I breathed. Everything about you does. His eyes searched mine. Your choice. Always. I swallowed. I won't be owned. A slow, real smile touched his mouth. I don't want you owned. My phone buzzed. Victor. Dominic had a workable structure. The war was moving whether my heart was ready or not. I stepped back, forcing my voice to steady. We need to join them. Alexei nodded once, mask back in place. And as we walked to his office, I realized the most dangerous thing in this entire situation wasn't the Varga Syndicate. It was the fact that Alexei Koval had looked at the ruined parts of me and decided they were worth protecting. Because men like him didn't protect without claiming, and I wasn't sure whether I could survive another man's claim or resist wanting it. The signing happened at 10 a.m. No gunshots, no shouting. Just pens, paper, and the quiet hum of a notary who had no idea he was witnessing a battlefield. Antonio Marchetti, the seller's patriarch, looked like a man swallowing something bitter. He'd played too far above his weight class when he let the Varga Syndicate into his deal, and now he could feel the consequences closing around his throat. Dominic Ferraro avoided my eyes. Alexei didn't avoid anything. He signed with the calm certainty of a man who had already won, because the real fight wasn't the purchase. It was what happened immediately after. Victor executed the filing sequence like a conductor leading a deadly orchestra. Delaware transfer documents, Cayman filings, Massachusetts operational control assignment, backup couriers on standby in case a system went down. By noon, it was done. By evening, the company Alexei had bought no longer sat where the Varga watchers expected it to sit. Ownership had moved, cleanly, legally, ruthlessly, into a structure they couldn't unwind before their own tripwires snapped. Dominic left Boston that same night. New passport, new face on paper. One last look at me that carried something like regret. I'm sorry, he said quietly before he boarded the plane. I didn't forgive him, but I didn't need forgiveness to move forward. Because the next file Alexei placed in my hands wasn't an acquisition packet. It was my life. A petition to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers, motion to vacate disbarment, affidavits, evidence exhibits, and Dominic's notarized confession, signed without a gun to his head, witnessed by a neutral attorney, supported by bank trails and footage that existed long before Alexei ever touched my orbit. How? I whispered. Alexei's voice was steady. Resources, favors, people who remember owing my family. His eyes held mine. And you? Because you know where the bones are buried. 90 days, they told us. 74 days later, the envelope arrived. Victor set it on my desk like it was an artifact. My hands shook as I opened it. The language was formal, dense, coldly bureaucratic, until one line shattered me. Hereby reinstates Serafina Rinaldi to full membership in good standing. I read it twice. Then a third time, because my brain refused to believe joy was allowed. Alexei came behind my chair, hands settling on my shoulders. Congratulations, counselor, he murmured. The title broke something in me. I cried into my hands like the woman I had refused to be for years. Alexei didn't tell me to stop. He didn't tell me to be strong. He just held me like strength was something I already had. Champagne appeared. Quiet celebration. No staff. No performance. Then the offers started. Firms that used to ignore my emails suddenly wanted to talk. They loved a comeback story. I didn't. I didn't want to return to rooms full of people who'd watched me burn and warmed their hands on the flames. I wanted work that meant something. I'm not going back, I told Alexei. His eyes didn't flicker. Then stay. Stay where? With me, he said simply. Legitimately. It wasn't a proposal with fireworks. It was an offer with weight. He wanted to transform what he'd inherited, clean the gray, burn the shadows out of the corners. And he wanted me at the center of that transformation, not as a prisoner, not as a decoration, as a partner. So I agreed. On paper first, because paper was where I felt safest. General counsel for Koval Holdings. We built a legal division that didn't exist to cover crimes. It existed to prevent them. Compliance, restructuring, contracts that could survive scrutiny. And then something unexpected happened. Other people started coming. Attorneys disbarred under suspicious circumstances. Associates asked to resign when they discovered theft. Paralegals who suspected their bosses were using them as scapegoats. They came to me because I had survived the thing they feared. I built a practice inside the corporation, a division dedicated to reinstatements, wrongful accusations, professional redemption. Alexei funded it without hesitation. You're creating enemies, Victor warned one night. Good, I said. Let every corrupt attorney in this city lose sleep. For a while, it felt like we'd won. Then Dominic came back. Victor found out first, like he always did. He walked into Alexei's office with a folder and a face like bad weather. Ferraro's in Boston, he said. He's filed a motion. My stomach dropped. I snatched the filing from Victor's hands and read the words that tried to turn my blood to ice. He claimed coercion. He claimed extortion. He claimed my reinstatement was built on fabricated evidence and threats. 2 weeks from now, public proceeding. He wasn't trying to win with truth. He was trying to taint me, destroy credibility, kill the comeback. Alexei's voice turned calm in the way it only did when he was furious. He wants a spectacle. He'll get one, I said. For 2 weeks, we prepared. Not just evidence, narrative. Because in a public hearing, people didn't only decide based on facts. They decided based on what story felt believable. Dominic had always understood that. So I built a story so tight it couldn't be shaken. We found more victims. 3 attorneys Dominic had undermined with similar patterns. We obtained older logs from the firm's network security. We traced recent deposits into his offshore accounts. And then Margaret Keene, who'd sat at that hotel table months earlier, walked into my office like a woman who had finally decided to stop being afraid. I saw him plant documents 4 years ago, she said quietly. I stayed silent because his family had influence. I've hated myself for it ever since. What changed? I asked, voice careful. He tried it again last month, she said. A young associate. Same technique, same cold smile. I couldn't let it happen again. She slid a folder across my desk. Emails, notes, a timeline. Use this, she said. End him. The hearing took place in Suffolk County's largest courtroom, packed. Not because people cared about justice, because Boston loves a public execution. Dominic arrived in a perfect suit with a sharp-faced attorney at his side. He looked like a man who believed he could talk his way out of gravity. The panel began with Dominic's accusation. I was a vengeful woman allied with organized crime. His confession was forced. Alexei's people threatened his family. When my turn came, I stood with calm hands and a voice that didn't tremble. Your honors, I said. Mr. Ferraro wants you to believe he's a victim. Let me show you the pattern. I started with the footage from 4 years ago. Clear. Time-stamped. Dominic at my workstation at 2:07 a.m. Then the bank records. Offshore deposits matching client losses. Then the 3 other attorneys, each describing the same slow sabotage. Then Margaret took the stand and told the truth she should have told years earlier. Dominic's attorney tried to paint her as bitter, unstable, motivated by guilt. Margaret didn't flinch. I'm motivated by the fact that I watched an innocent woman's life get destroyed, she said, voice steady. And I watched him try to do it again. When it was time, I called my last witness. Ronaldo Dominic Ferraro. I corrected myself aloud in the way a courtroom forces you to. Mr. Ferraro to the stand. His attorney objected. Judge Reyes, presiding, overruled. Dominic sat on the witness chair with eyes that kept darting to Alexei like he could convince himself this was all about fear, not truth. I asked him the questions that matter. Did anyone touch you? No. Were explicit threats made in the presence of witnesses? No. So you assumed violence, I said calmly. Because it served your story. Dominic's face tightened. Then I slid the final page across. A bank statement, I said. From last month. Your offshore account. Still active. Still receiving money. His lips parted. No sound came out. The deposit, I continued, originates from a client trust account, Marchetti and Locke, the same firm you're claiming you're too ethical to betray. The courtroom shifted. Whispers like a wave. Judge Reyes called for order. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Mr. Ferraro isn't here because he was coerced, I said. He's here because he got caught. Again. The panel recessed. When they returned, Judge Reyes's face was stone. Mr. Ferraro's allegations are without merit, she said. The confession appears voluntary and is supported by independent evidence. Further, the evidence of recent misconduct is referred to the district attorney. Mr. Ferraro is suspended pending disbarment proceedings. Dominic stood abruptly, rage bursting through his mask. She's working with criminals. Sit, Judge Reyes snapped, and her voice held the kind of authority Dominic had spent his career exploiting. You do not get to accuse others of impropriety while engaging in theft. It was done. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras, questions, judgment in people's eyes because Alexei stood beside me and no one could decide whether I was brave or damned. I faced the cameras anyway. 4 years ago, I said, I was destroyed by a system that accepted lies because it was easier than investigating the truth. My voice carried. Today, that system finally corrected itself, not because I stayed silent, but because I fought back. A reporter shouted, "What about your association with Alexei Koval?" I glanced at him. He gave the smallest nod. Permission, not control. A man gave me work when no one else would, I said. He believed me when I was called a liar. He protected me when I had no protection. And yes, I'm proud of what we're building. Legitimate businesses, second chances, and systems designed to stop corruption. Someone asked about us. Rumors that had been circling. I didn't flinch. We're married, I said simply. The flash of cameras felt like lightning, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't being defined by what people whispered. I was being defined by what I'd built. Years passed. Koval Holdings became the kind of company business journals love to write about. Innovative, clean, astonishingly compliant for a corporation with that history. My legal division expanded beyond Boston. We helped hundreds, then thousands. People who had been blamed because someone else needed a scapegoat. People who needed someone to look them in the eye and say, I believe you, now let's prove it. And at home, a life grew that didn't feel stolen. A little boy with Alexei's dark hair and my stubborn focus. A little girl who demanded to help with filing and reorganized my pens by color. A third child on the way when I stood on courthouse steps again. This time not as a woman clearing her name, but as a woman who had become impossible to erase. One morning, Alexei walked into my office carrying a small plaque. He set it on my desk like it mattered as much as any contract. Serafina Rinaldi, attorney at law reinstated in good standing. Justice delayed is not justice denied. So every client knows, he said quietly, that you understand their fight. My throat tightened. You didn't save me, I told him. He stepped close, hands steady on my waist. You saved yourself. I just refused to let the world pretend you didn't deserve it. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the city lights shimmered beyond the windows, I'd remember the moment that started it all. A lamp-plate, a contract on a table, one poisonous phrase. And I'd think, I didn't just point at a clause. I pointed at my own ending and rewrote it. Hello, love? If this story hit your heart, leave a like. It helps us keep bringing you more. And if you know someone who needs a second chance story, share it with them. Until next time, sending love.